Hey there, welcome back to my channel, and we will continue building our Spring Boot application, which is a job application that we are building entirely using Java and Spring Boot. Now, if you're new to this channel and if you're watching this video for the first time, so let me tell you that this video is a part of a series. So if you want to watch the previous videos, you can find the link to the playlist in the description of this video. So be sure to watch all those videos and then come to this one to continue watching to get a better context of what is happening in this lecture. Now, talking about what are we going to cover in this video. So in this particular video, we are going to build or continue building our job application using Spring Boot. Now we are going to start building on entities like companies, reviews. We are going to set up mappings between them. We are going to learn how to fetch these entities right from Postman. We will also talk about how we can design the reviews API for our application. So it's going to be a lot of learning today. And I promise you that by the end of this video, you are going to return with a wealth of information and also some hands-on knowledge. I would also request you all to hit the subscribe button and put on the bell notification icon and also like this video and share it with your friends. Because even a single subscription motivates me a lot to bring such amazing free content to you all. And subscribing to my channel also makes sure that you don't miss out on any future videos that I'm uploading. So do subscribe and check out the description to get more such amazing content from myself. And without further ado, we are going to jump into the session. So let's get started. Welcome back. So what are we going to build next? So this is our application in its complete form, and we have job, company and reviews in our application, and here is how it should work. So far we have worked on job controller, job service and the job repository, where everything works with persistent data, where we are persisting the job entity into the database. So now it's time to build company and review functionality as well. So here are the endpoints that we are going to define for company. So we have get companies, which will enable us to fetch the list of all the companies that exist in the database. Then we have put companies, where we can update a company with the help of an ID. Okay, so we have to specify the ID of the company which we want to update. And in the response body, like in the request body, not the response body. So in the request body, we will be adding the updated version of the company. So that's the put request. Then we have post request on /companies, wherein we will have the company object in the request body, and that will help us save the company. Then we have the delete request, where with the help of ID over here, we are deleting a specific company. And then we can get the companies with the help of ID as well. So this is the company's API structure. These are all the APIs that we are going to define. And then we have the reviews functionality, where we have reviews associated with companies. So you can see the endpoint. You have companies /company ID reviews. So for every company, we have a review. So we say companies / the ID 1 / reviews. So this is going to give us, this get request is going to give us reviews for a particular company and the company ID that you specify. Then you have post request, wherein you can add the review against a particular company using this post, and the review object goes in the post like the request body. Okay. Then you have get, where you can get a particular review, okay, with the help of this ID against a particular company. Then you have put request, where you can update the review, a specific review against a company. And then you work with delete request, where you can delete a particular review against a company. So this is the review functionality. So these two functionalities are pending now, and they are much more similar like the job functionality that we have built. So if you have gone through the job functionality and if you are comfortable and have understood everything, what I would request you all is to take this entire set of APIs as a challenge, and you can try this yourself. And once you have attempted solving or adding all of these APIs to your application, you can come back and watch the video to get hold of the solution. Okay. And you can compare it with your solution as well. So that would give you some code writing experience and it will boost your confidence. So yeah, I would request you all to attempt that and like continue with the next lectures. All right. So that's about this class. I shall see you all soon. Thank you. So let us start working on companies and let us start set up the controller, service and repository layer for company. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder here or a package. I'm going to call this company like so. And within this package, I'm going to have first company controller and one second. So I have job controller, job repository and job service. So I'll have company controller, then company service, and then I'll have the company repository like so. Okay, and this has to be an interface. So I'll add this. We will also need the company entity. So I'll say company like so. So we have done setting up all the files. Okay, we also need this implementation. Okay, so what I will do is I'll create a new Java class. Okay, I'll say IMPL dot. So I need this class to be created in the IMPL package, and I'll say company service IMPL. So I'll follow the convention of job and I'll say enter. So you can see this being created. All right. So we are done with the setup of controller, service and repository. Let us start building the functionality to get all the companies from the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start defining the company entity over here. Okay. And we are going to have quite some fields that we are going to store with company. So the field that we are going to need is ID, name, description. Okay. So I'm going to say private, long, and I'll say ID. This will be private, string, and I'm going to say name over here like so. And then I'm going to have private, string and description. So yeah. Now what we need to do is we need to map every company to the list of jobs. Okay. How do we define a mapping? So this mapping meaning there is a relationship between this company entity and the job entity. Okay. So every company has a list of jobs. That is how they relate in the real world. So I'm going to say private list and I'm going to have job over here. So this is a job entity and I'm going to say jobs like so. Okay. And I'm going to also mention an annotation over here. So I'm going to say @1-to-many. Now 1-to-many means that one company has many jobs, and that is the relation that we are creating with the job entity. And 1-to-many annotation is coming in from the Jakarta.persistence 1-to-many. So this is done. Now what I need to do is I need to also specify the 1-to-many relationship with reviews. Okay, but we have not created reviews. So how it will work is every company has a list of jobs and every company also has a list of reviews. So we'll define that later on. Okay. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a constructor here created. Okay. So I'll say generate constructor. and I'll say select none. So this is for the GPA. Okay. And I'm going to also say like generate the getters and setters like so. And I'm going to mark this particular entity as entity. Okay. Here using the annotation, and I'm going to mark ID field as ID, and I'm going to say generated value, and I'm going to specify the strategy as identity like so. So this will be auto generated, and then we have a mapping created for jobs. Okay. So we need to create a mapping over here later on for reviews. So I'll say reviews will be listed like so. So I'll say private. So I'll just duplicate this and I'll say reviews. So review over here, and this will be plural like so. Okay. So if we add this now, we'll get an error, of course, because the review entity does not exist yet. Okay. So this is done. Now what we need to do is we need to head over to the company repository. Okay. And we need to make some changes over here. So in this interface, I need to say extends JPA repository, and I'll say company is the entity and long is the ID type like so. So the repository is set now. Now let's head over to company service over here. Now what are we doing in the company service? So in this particular, so not in this one. So, okay, so this has to be an interface, but we created this as a class. So I'll change the definition of this to interface. Okay. So company service is an interface which is being implemented by company service implementation. Okay. So over here, I'm just going to define some methods. Okay. So the first method we are going to make use of is list company like so, and we are getting all companies. So this is the functionality that we are building right now, wherein we are getting the list of all the companies. And here in the company service implementation, I'm going to say implements company service. Now once you do that, you will be asked to implement all the methods. So I'm going to just do that. Now over here, we need to return the list of all the companies from the database. So for that, I'm going to define a repository. Okay, I'm going to say private company. So company repository, and this can be company repository here. Then we need to initialize it, and we will initialize it in the constructor, and this will be managed by Spring. And over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say company repository dot find all. So this method is going to return all the instances of company that exist in the database. Now let us head over to the controller, like the company controller. And here I'm going to add a mapping that will handle the URL to get all the companies. Okay. So I'm going to first define a REST controller over here. So I'm going to say this is a REST controller which handles the REST queries. And here I'm going to also add request mapping, which will define the mapping for this controller. Okay, so I'm going to say companies over here. Okay. Now over here, I'm going to create an object of company service, because controller will use the service object to work with company. And then I'll say generate constructor, and I'll get this initialized with the help of Spring Framework. Now here I'm going to create a method. So I'm going to say public list company, and I'm going to say get all companies. And over here, I'm going to just say return company service dot get all companies like so. And now we need to map this to the URL. So I'm going to say get mapping. So this is a get request, of course. So it will be a get mapping, and we don't need to specify the URL because we have already mapped this controller to companies. So this is a URL that we'll use. So any get request on this URL will give you the list of all the companies. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to run this particular application. Okay, so you got an error, and the error says parameter 0 of constructor in company controller not found. Okay, and we need to define a bean called company service. So what is happening is it is trying to find, so we are trying to initialize this particular instance of company service with the help of Spring. Now Spring is not able to find Spring service, and there is a reason for this. Now if you go to company service implementation, we have not added the service annotation, so we need to add that, and this will tell Spring Boot that it needs to manage this class as a service. So now we'll run this, and now let's see if the error goes away. So you can see the error goes away, and now let's head over to Postman and see this in action. Okay, so we don't have jobs, in fact. Okay, so we added a job, and I'll get the job. So we have one job created. Okay, now we need to get the list of all the companies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate this URL. Okay, so I'm going to say duplicate this URL, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say companies, and I'm going to edit the name as well for this. Okay, and then I'm going to send a GET request. So we are not going to get any response as of now from this query because there are literally no companies created yet. Okay, but we can even check if the company entity is created in the H2 database. So I'll connect, and here you can see we have company. So if you run company, you don't have any data, but we also have one more table which stores the relationship of company and jobs. Okay, so I'll clear this and I'll select this. So this has two fields, company ID and job ID. So if you expand this, so we are storing the company information in company table, and the mapping of company to job, like which company has which job, that mapping is stored in this particular table. And this table is created because we have specified a one-to-many relationship between the job and the company. Okay, so this relationship is being managed in a separate table. That is what you will notice. So that's how you can create an API to get the list of all the companies. Welcome back. So let us start writing some code to update the companies. So what I'm going to do is I am going to head over to company service over here. Okay, and I'm going to create a new method over here. Okay, and this method is going to just help me update the company. So what I want to do is I'll return the company object here. I'll say company, and I'll say update company. And here I'll accept a parameter which is the updated company over here. So you can even skip the return type if you wish to. So what I will be doing is I will be updating the company and returning the same company object. But if you don't want to return anything, you can just have void or something. So if you go over here and in job service, you can see we have updated the job with the help of a boolean. So you can do that way as well. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to update the company here, and I'm going to implement the methods like so. Okay. And here in the implementation, okay, so I'll also need ID. So I should accept the ID like we have done for the job service. Okay. So what I will go do is I'll head over to company service here. Okay. And let me also change this so I won't return the company object, and I'll say long ID like so. Okay. And I'll go over here and I'll just overwrite this like so. Okay. And I'll just remove this So this is the older one. Okay. Now what I can do is I can refer to the job service IMPL. Okay. And I can do it the similar way. Okay. So I'll just copy this entire code over here. I'll head over to the company service. And here I'm going to paste this entire code. Okay. Now, of course, we are making use of job repository, which is not right. So I'll change this to company repository here. Okay. And instead of job, this will be the company object. So I'll say company like so. And here this will be, so I'll refactor this. Okay. I'll say, let this be company optional. I'll select from the suggestion. Okay. So this is done. Now here I need to change this type to that of company. Okay. And I can update this here and I'll say company like so. And here we need to update the update parameters. Okay. So here we are calling the setters from the job class, which won't work. Okay. So what I will be doing is I will say dot set and I need to set the description here. Okay. And the description can be company. Okay. So this variable name conflicts with this one over here, the parameter. So what I can do is I can call this as company and I can refactor. I can say company to update. So here I can say company to update like so. Okay. This is done. Here I can say company now, company dot get description. Okay. This is done. Then I need the name as well. So I'll say set name and I can say company dot get name like so. Then I also need the we don't need to update the ID, of course. So we need to update the jobs. So I can say company dot jobs, like get jobs. Okay. And rest of the part, I can just remove it over here. Okay. And here I can say company service or company repository. I'm sorry. And we'll update the company. So we will return true over here. Okay. And if the update fails, we can return false. I can even write this in the else statement, like if you wish to. So instead of adding this outside, I can say else like this. Okay. So if company is present, then update, else return false. Okay. So this works perfectly fine now. Okay. I'll hit, so this is saved. I'll hit save. So I'll head over to the controller now. Okay. Now here in the controller, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new method like so. And I'm going to say put. So this is the put mapping that I'm creating. I'll have an import over here. Okay. Now here I'll say update company like so. Okay. And of course, this will have a parameter. Okay. I'll delete this over here. Okay. So after update, I'm going to return a string. Okay. And I'll also have consistency over here in terms of returning the response. So I'll add response entity over here. Okay. And I'll say string over here like so. Okay. And here I'll say path variable. So we will have path variable, which we'll accept in the form of the path parameter. And this will come in as ID over here. Okay. We also need one more parameter, which is request body. So we'll say request body company and I'll get the company like so. Okay. Now here I'm going to return new response entity. Okay. And I'm going to say like company updated successfully like so. Okay. And here I'll return http status dot okay like so. All right. I'll move this to a new line. Okay. Now over here, we need to update the company. So I'm going to say company service dot update company, like so. And here I'm going to pass in the ID and update it. Okay, so update company needs company and ID. Okay, so I have passed in ID and company. So it will be company and ID. This should work. All right. So yeah, this works perfectly fine, I believe, and this should work perfectly fine. And I'll also have the URL over here. So I'll pass in ID. So this will be the request parameter that we will accept, and this path variable will come in and sit in this parameter, and request body will have the company which will come in and which will be triggered to the service. Okay, and within service we are updating everything. Okay, so if you go to company service, here we are updating the company. So let us start working towards creating the functionality to save the companies from the API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to company service, okay, and I'm going to define the method over here. So if you remember, if you head over to the job service, we have a method void create job, okay. So what I will be doing is I'll be defining a similar method over here. Okay, we can paste the similar method. I'll remove this import statement over here, which got copied. So I'll say create company, and here I'll say company, and this will be the company object. So we are accepting the company object as the part of the method so that we can save it into our database. Okay. Now I'm going to head over to the implementation class, and like always, we are going to get an error immediately. And this error is because we are yet to implement this method. So now here, I'm going to create, or I'm going to write the code to create the company. So I'm going to say repository dot save, and I'll pass in the company object. So this will save the company for me. So we have defined the service. Now let us head over to the controller. Okay. So here in the controller, so not in the job controller, but we'll go to the company controller. Okay. We don't have it open, I believe. So I'll open it from here. So here in the company controller, we are going to create a method and a mapping to save the company. Okay. So I'm going to say public, and I'm going to have string as a response, and I'm going to say add company, like so, and I'm going to pass in the request body, like so, and the company object will be the part of the request body. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the service class. So company service dot create company, and I'm going to pass the company object, like so. Another thing is we are using string here, so I'll change this to response entity. Okay, I'll just copy this response entity and I'll specify string, like so. And here I'll add a return statement. So I'll say return new response entity, and I'll say company added successfully, like so. And I'll pass in the HTTP status code as created. Added. So we have managed the add company. Okay. Now if you scroll up here also, we are returning the list. So here what we can do is, in order to maintain consistency, I'll add a response entity here as well. And I'll add the closing angular brackets. Okay. And here I'll say new response entity, and I'll pass in this object, and I'll say HTTP status dot okay, like so. Okay, so we have some consistency now. Everybody is returning response entity. Okay, also I will head over to application.properties here, and instead of create drop, So instead of creating the schema every time and dropping it, I'll say update over here. So this is also one of the properties that we have here. Okay. So I'll close this. Now what we can do is we have the code written and I can like run the application. Let us test the changes in Postman. So the application has started. Okay. Now I'll move to Postman. And here I will duplicate this particular request, which is for posting the jobs. Okay. So I'll duplicate this. All right. And I'll change this to companies like so. And here in the body, I'll have title. So we need title and description, or we don't need title. We need name. So it's called name. So I can say company 1 and the description can be description. Okay. So I'll just delete this test over here. So description 1 like so. Okay. And I'll hit save. So before hitting save, I'll just copy this URL and modify the name and I'll hit save. Okay. Now let me run this request. So I run this request and it says method not allowed. Okay. I believe I know the mistake that we did. We have not mapped it to any URL yet. Okay. So we need to map the URL. We need to say post mapping here. And I believe that is it. And I'll rerun the application. So the application runs. Now back to Postman and I'll run this request and you will see company is being added. And now if you like get all the companies like so, you will see like all the companies coming out. Now you're getting jobs as well as a part of the response. Okay. And this is because company is related to jobs. Okay. We can even test the put request or the update request. So here I have the request already created and this is a put request. You can see I have these parameters in the body and the URL is trying to update the company with ID 1. Okay. If I send this, you'll get 200. Okay. And if you try to get the company now, you will see the name has changed and also the description has changed. This is about creating the company and updating as well. Okay. So both the functionalities are working perfectly fine. All right. Welcome back. So let us start talking about the relationship between jobs and companies. So when we executed this particular URL, wherein we got all the companies, we saw that we are getting jobs as well with it. And the reason for this is because in our source code here, okay, and if you go to company, we have defined the list of jobs, which means that every company has multiple jobs. So one company can have a list of jobs that it can relate to. Okay. And that is why we have mentioned this annotation here, one to many. Okay. But we have only the relationship created from company to that of jobs. So if you go to the job entity, so I have this open here. We have not defined the relationship with company over here. So job as well relates to a company, right? So what I will do is I'll define a relationship over here. So I'll say private company and I'll specify the name of this field as company and I'll specify this as one to many. Okay. Now, once we have added the field, we also need to add some getters and setters. So I'll say generate getter and setter and I'll get the getters and setters added. Now, what we have done is we have created a mapping like one to many mapping with company to jobs. And so this will be many to one and not one to many. So I'll say many to one because many jobs are linked to one company. Okay. So what I have done is I have created a mapping. So this is one to many mapping from company to that of jobs. And then we have many to one mapping from jobs to that of company. Now, if I run the application, let us see the output. So the application is started, and if you take a look at the table structure, okay, so let me refresh this structure here, okay, and let me connect. So you will see there is a jobs table, there is a company table. So if you take a look at the job here, so I'll just expand it over here. So job has this column company ID, as you can see, and company does not have any reference to that of job, but there is a separate table company underscore jobs, okay, which is maintaining the relationship again between companies and jobs. So we don't need this, okay. Like this, there is a separate table as well, and you have the relationship defined in the job table as well. So what I'm going to do is, in order to get rid of that table, I'm going to go to company.java, okay, and I'm going to add a property over here. I'm going to say mapped by, and I'll say company. So what this tells is this particular relationship that exists from company to that of job is mapped by a field called company, which exists in jobs. Okay. So since we are creating a relationship here from company to that of jobs, we are specifying that within the job entity, we have a field which is also mapping this particular relationship. Okay. And after specifying this, if you run the code, okay, and if you head over to the browser and refresh, so we will have to connect again, you will see that separate table which was maintaining the relationship is now gone. So now the relationship will be governed by this company ID column in the jobs table. Okay. So we are done defining the relationship. Now what we can do is we will head over to Postman. Okay. So I'll open Postman over here. Now I'm going to show you by creating a job. So I'll create a job here. Okay. And I'll say send. So we have created the job, but we have a new field now in the job entity, and we have not added that field over here. Okay. So that field governs the relationship. So if you try to get the jobs over here now, you will get the company object as null. And that is because we have not mentioned any company as the input. Now, what I will do is I will add the company over here. Okay. So I'll say company. And since it's an object, I'll add a pair of curly braces, and within that, I'll say ID 1. So we want this job to be mapped or linked to the company with the ID 1. Now, one thing over here is if I execute this, I'm going to get an error. So I got an internal server error. Now, why did I get this? So if I head over to my ID and if I click on the console, you will see a huge stack trace over here. Okay. And somewhere over here, you will see an error which will highlight referential integrity constraint violation. So you can see referential integrity constraint violation. Okay. And this is because of company ID. So what is happening is here you are trying to link a job to a company that does not exist. Okay. So if you try to get all the companies, this company does not exist yet because we have not created this company yet. Okay. So what I will do is I will create the company, but let me tell you that you can also handle this scenario without creating a company. Okay. So you can get rid of this error. And how? So I'll show this to you. So instead of like just passing the ID, you can pass the entire company object. So you can pass the company object over here like so. Okay. So here you have all the details that a company needs, okay, for its creation. And if you go to the code over here, okay, we have company as a part of the job. So there won't be any problem with that JSON. You get that JSON, and in controller, you will have to handle the scenario of company does not exist. Okay. So what you will do is when you are trying to create a job, okay, you can, let me show some code over here. So you can say company C is equal to job dot get company. So what you are doing is you are getting the company from this job object, which you are getting from the request body, and which we are sending from Postman. So you will get the company over here, and then you will write a if condition to check if this company exists in the database or not. If it exists, well and good, you create the job itself. If it does not exist, then you create the company first and then create the job. So that is how you can handle it. But I won't be handling this. We don't need to. So how our application will work is we'll get rid of this JSON. Okay. So we will be creating company first. Okay. So I'm going to head over to this another post request where we can create company, and I'll get the companies. I have a company now with ID 1. Now I'll run this query. And now earlier I was getting internal server error. Now I won't get any error. So you can see the error does not exist now and the job was added successfully. Now if you try to get all the jobs, okay, we probably got an error. So what went wrong? Let us check. So if I scroll down, okay, so this is the error that we have got. So it says could not write JSON, infinite recursion, Stack Overflow error with root cause. So I'll tell you what happened. So we have company linked to job and job linked to company. So it's an infinite loop over there. Okay. So here we are trying to get the job which will have the company object, and company object will have the job object as well. Because if you take a look at the company object, okay, so we got an error here as well. Okay. So what we need to do to fix this error is in the company.java. Okay. Here I'm going to say ignore from the JSON. So I'm going to add an annotation, JSON ignore. So this annotation is going to remove those recursive callbacks that we are getting. Okay. So I'll rerun the application. Now here in Postman, I will try getting some companies. We don't have companies. So I'll create the company first and then we'll check for company. We have the company. Now I'll try creating a job, and now it got created successfully. And now if I try to get the jobs, okay, earlier you were getting an error and now you won't. Okay. So you get the job JSON with the company JSON as well. Okay. So this is working perfectly fine. We can even test the update. Okay. I believe update is working perfectly fine, but I'll just try updating and I'll run this. So you can see the update is also working fine. So that's about the relationship between company and jobs. So let us start building the functionality to delete a particular company. And what I would request you all is to take this up as a challenge. You can try solving this or try building this functionality by yourself and then come back and watch me solve the problem. Okay. So I would request you all to pause the video right now. So how did it go? I hope you all had a chance to attempt this challenge. So I'll begin with the solution here. So we are first going to create a method in the company service interface, and then we are going to implement it into company service implementation class. So we are going to start with the service layer. So I'm going to say Boolean and I'm going to say delete company like so. And I'm going to say delete company by ID because we are going to need ID over here. So I have this method created. Now, if I switch over to company service implementation, I'll get an error and I'll say implement methods and I'll say okay. So here I'm going to write the code to delete the company by ID. Okay. So I'm going to say here company repository dot delete by ID, and I'm going to pass the ID which is of long type. Okay. So I've done this. Now we are supposed to return a Boolean. Okay. So if the company exists in the database and if it's deleted successfully, then we are going to return true, else we can return false. So I'm going to write an if condition. Okay. And I'm going to say company repository dot I'll say exist. So you can see exists by ID is a method here. So this will check if the company exists in the database. Okay. And if it exists, I'm going to call in this method here. Okay. And I'm going to say return true. Okay. Like so. So if the company ID exists, then we are going to delete the company and then return true. Else I'm going to return false. So I can say else and I can return false from here. So this is done. We have set up the service layer right now. Let's head over to the controller and let us create a method over here which will map to a delete request. So I'm going to say public void and delete company. Now to delete the company, I'm going to need the ID over here. So I'm going to say long ID and I'm going to accept it from the path variable. Okay. And here what I will do is I'll say boolean is deleted. So I'm checking if the company was successfully deleted by the service layer. And I'm going to say service dot delete company by ID like so. Okay. Now based on the value of this boolean variable, I can say return new response entity. So we need to return response entity. We have mentioned void here, but we should return response entity, and I'll say response entity as that of string. Okay. And here I'm going to say if is deleted, I'll say company successfully deleted like so. And I'm going to say http status dot okay. All right. And so this is done. Okay. So here I'm going to say else. Okay. The else block is going to talk about return, and I'll return this same response entity object. Okay. But here I'll say company not found. And instead of okay, I'll say not found over here. Okay. And we need to map this particular method to a request. So I'm going to say /id. So this is mapped to delete mapping over here. Okay. Now I'll rerun the project and let us see how this works in the browser. Okay. Now here in the browser, I'm going to head over to the delete request that we have for jobs. I'm going to duplicate the delete request. Okay. And instead of jobs, I'm going to have companies like so. I'll copy this and I'll paste it over here. So we have the delete request created for companies. Now if I send this, we get not found, like companies not found is the message. And this is because no companies exist in the database. Fair enough. Now what I can do is I can create a company. So let me create a company. We created the company. Let us check. So this has the ID 1. Now let me delete this one. Okay. So earlier we got 404 not found. Now if I trigger this, we have company successfully deleted with 200 okay. And now if you switch over to companies, you get an empty array response. Okay. So this is how the delete functionality will work. Hello everybody. Let us start building the functionality to get a particular company. Okay. So I'm going to define this functionality starting from the service layer. So let us open the company service. So also I would request you all that since we have already done the jobs functionality, you can take this up as a challenge and try to write code yourself. And once you are done, you can come back and watch the solution and compare the code. Okay. So pause the video right now and attempt this as a challenge. Welcome back. So I hope you got a chance to attempt this. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by defining a method here in the company service. So I'm going to say company and I'm going to return. So I'm going to say get company by ID, like so. And this will be long again, okay, long ID here. Okay, I'll hit save and we'll head over to the implementation class to implement the method that we have just defined. Okay, so over here now what I'm going to do is return. I'm going to make use of repository, company repository dot, I'm going to say find by ID over here. And you can see find by ID here returns an optional. Okay, so if you take a look here, this one is optional, the return type here. So I'll select this, I'll pass in the ID, okay, and I'll say dot or else null. So if the company ID is found, then we return the company, or else we return null. Okay, head over now to the controller. So here in the company controller, I'm going to define the method first. So I'll switch over to the end. I'll move to the end of the code and I'll say public company get company. Okay, and here I'm going to say path variable and I'm going to say long ID, like so. Now we have defined a similar method in the job as well. Okay, so if you take a look over here, so this is the method wherein we get the job, and if it's null, based on the value of job object, then we return different responses. So we are going to write some similar logic. So I'm going to get the company first. Okay, I'm going to say company is equal to service dot get company by ID, and I'm going to pass in the ID. And then I'm going to say if company is equal to or is not equal to null, okay, then I can say return, I'll say new response entity, okay, and here I'll return the company object and I'll also return the status. So I'll say http status dot okay. Now the problem is we are returning response entity, but here we have said company. So I'll change this to response entity of company type. Okay, now this is done. Now let me add the else clause over here. So I'm going to say else, and here I'm going to return new response entity. I'm going to say company not found, like so. Okay, and here I can say http status dot not found. Okay, so we are getting an error because we are returning the response entity of company type. So we'll have to do away with this string here. So I'll just remove this and I'll hit save. Okay, now let us rerun. Okay, 1 second. So I'll hit cancel. Before rerunning, we also need to map this particular method to the mapping. So I'll say get mapping slash, okay, like slash, and I'll say ID here. Okay, and then I'll run this code. So let us run and see the output. So the project is running. Now over here, I'll duplicate this request, which I have for jobs. Okay, and I'll say company over here. Okay, and I'll copy the companies or I'll copy this entire URL and I'll add it to the name and we will hit save. Now let us try to retrieve the company with ID 4. Of course, this does not exist, so we are getting 404. Now let us create a company. So I created a company, company 1. Then I'll create one more company, company 2. Let us get all the companies. So you have 2 companies now, 1 and 2. Now let us try getting a company. So I'll get a company with ID 1 first. We are getting it, okay. With 2, we are getting it. And if you add 3, 3 does not exist. So we'll get 404. So this is how you can work on the functionality to get a particular company. Welcome to this class. So this is the APIs that we have for working with reviews. So we have the get request to get the reviews against a particular company. Okay. And if you notice all the API requests, we have company ID associated. Okay. So we have post request to add a company. We have get request to get a single review, put request to update a review, and delete request to delete a particular review. So this is going to be similar to the jobs functionality and the company functionality that we have built. We will even have a relationship between company object and the review object, or company entity and the review entity, where we will have one-to-many and many-to-one mapping between these two entities. All right. So that's about reviews, and let's get started. So now let's begin with reviews. And what we are going to do is we are going to start defining the review controller, service, and the repository. All right. So I'm going to head over to my project structure. I'm going to collapse all of this. So what I would request you all is you all can take this as an exercise and define all of this yourself. And you can do this by pausing this video right now and attempting it yourself. This will give you some hands-on practice, and then you can come back and watch the solution. So I'll say package, and I'll create a review package. Okay. Now within this review package, I'm going to create a new controller. So I'm going to say review controller, like so. Okay. And I'm going to have one more, which will be a service. So the service will be interface. Okay. So I'll say review service, like so. And then I'm going to have the review repository, which is going to be the interface again. So review repository, like so. So we are done defining the files that we need. Now I'm going to create a class, okay, which will be in implementation package, and I'm going to call this as review service IMPL. Okay. And this particular class is going to implement review service, like so. Okay. Now what we need to do is in the review controller, okay, I'm going to map this as REST controller. Okay. And I'm going to say request mapping over here, and I'm going to say companies / company ID here, like so. Okay. So all the endpoints with this URL will be routed to this particular controller. Okay. And then I'm going to define the review service. So I'm going to say private review service. Okay. And I'm going to say review service here. And we are going to add a constructor. So I'm going to generate constructor for review service. So this will be injected on the fly by Spring. All right. So this is about controller. Now in the review service, we are going to leave things as it is, because here is where all our methods are going to be declared. And then in the implementation class, we are going to define that as the service. So here is our implementation class, and I'll call this as service. Okay. So that Spring Boot knows that this is a service and it is supposed to manage it. Okay. Now in the repository, I'm going to extend it with JPA repository. So I'm going to say extend JPA repository. And here I'm going to add a review, and I'm going to say long. So this is of long type. Okay. Now we don't have the review entity created yet. Okay. So we need to define the review entity as well. We have not yet defined the review entity. So I'll hover on this and I'll say create class review. Okay. So you will see this pop up and I'll say okay. So you can see this class was created in the same package here. All right. And now here I'm going to define the structure of reviews. So I'm going to say private long ID. I'm going to say private string title. So review is going to have ID, title, and it is also going to have a description. Okay, so I'm going to say description like so. And I'm going to say private double rating. So it is going to store the ratings as well. So I'm going to keep the reference to rating. Okay, so this is done. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to create the getters and setters. Okay, so I'm going to say generate getters and setters for all. Okay, so this is done. So we have the entity as well set up. Also, since we are managing this with the help of JPA, or we need to get this to the database, I'm going to call this as an entity. Now, the moment I call this as an entity, I need a default constructor. So I'll create a constructor and I'll say select none. So it will be a default one. Okay. And here I'm going to say this will be the ID and this will be generated. So we are not going to manage or generate the ID. It is going to be auto generated with the strategy of identity. Okay. So generation type will be identity. Okay. So I believe that is it we had to define. Okay. So we are done setting up of controller, the service, the repository, and the review entity as well. And this can help us get started for building the review functionality. All right. So that's about this class. I shall see you all soon. Thank you. So let us define the relationship between the review entity and the company. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to class review.java where we have the review entity defined. And here I'm going to link this to a particular company. So one company will have many reviews. Okay, so it will come across as private company like so. And we have company. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to map this as many to one. Okay, so this will be many to one mapping. And I'm going to mention JSON ignore over here. Now, there is a reason I'm mentioning JSON ignore because we will be having the same linking in the company.java as well. So here, if you go to the company.java, here we have the linking wherein we are saying like one company has multiple reviews. Okay, and I'll get this imported over here. Okay, so this will be one to many. And here also I can include the mapped by. Okay, I can say company over here. Okay, so it will be company only because here I'm mentioning the company. Okay, so this is how the relationship between review and company will work. After defining this, we need to create the getters and setters as well. Okay, so I'll just come over here and I'll generate the getter and setter for company. I'll hit save, and in the company.java as well, I'll generate the getters and setters. So we have the relationship set. Okay, let's move on to next. Let us start defining the functionality to get all the reviews for a particular company. So what we are going to do is we are going to head over to the controller, and the URL that we are going to have is /companies/company ID followed by /reviews. And whenever anyone calls this particular URL with a GET request, we are going to return the list of all the list of all the reviews for the mentioned company ID. So we'll begin with the service class. Okay, so here in the service, I'm going to have an implementation and I'm going to say list. So the return type is going to be review. Okay, so we are going to return a list of reviews and I'm going to say get all reviews like so. And I'm going to return long. So I'm going to accept, not return. So I'm going to accept a company ID. So this company ID will tell us we want reviews for which company, and then we will return the list of reviews in this format. Now, Heading over to the implementation class. So I'll open the implementation class for this. Now here you'll get a red mark, which indicates that you need to implement a particular method. And after implementation, the error goes away. Now, how do we get all the reviews for a particular company? Okay. Now, for doing that, we will need to say, so I'll say list review. So we need list of review, and I'll call this as reviews, is equal to review repository. So we have not created the repository object yet. Okay. So I'm going to say private review repository and review repository. And I'm going to also add this to a constructor. So I'll generate a constructor. Okay. So Spring Boot will make sure that it auto injects the instance of this on runtime. Okay. And here I'm going to say review repository dot find by. So we need to find by company ID, right? And you can see there is no method for that because this is a custom method that we are trying to use. So JPA repository has a lot of standard methods in, but sometimes you will need to have a custom method. So here we need find by company and then ID. And we need company ID as the parameter. Okay, so this is the method that we are looking for, wherein we are trying to find the reviews by company ID. Okay, and this does not exist. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to tell JPA to give us this method. But how do we tell JPA to give us this method? Because this does not exist. So do we have to write the implementation? Absolutely no. So what we will be doing is here we get a solution. So Intellij is telling create method find by company ID in review repository. So I'm just going to do this and it is going to create this particular method for me in the review repository. Now we don't need to define the implementation for this because this is an interface. Just by declaring it over here, we are telling JPA that it needs to generate the implementation of this on runtime. Okay. And with this declaration, Spring Data JPA automatically generates an implementation for this method at runtime. Okay. And how does it know what the functionality should be? So it breaks down the method name. So here, if I copy this method name, okay, and if I switch over to Notepad, so what it will do is it will say find by. Okay. So find by means we are looking to find something and we are trying to find it by something. Okay. Now what is that by? So here company is like company ID is one field that we have. Okay. So if you run this entire project, you will have company ID in the database. Okay. So we are telling Spring Data JPA that we need to find this entity, all the entities, okay, all the instances of this entity. So review, since we are writing it in the reviews repository. So give us all the records by company ID. And company ID is a field in the review. Okay, so if you go over here, we have mapped this to company over here. Okay, so this is how it breaks down, and on the runtime, it breaks it into this query. Okay, so here I have this notepad, another notepad, where this particular method will be translated to this particular query here. So it will say select star from review where company ID is equal to question mark. Okay. And when you call this particular method like this, so when you say review repository dot find by company ID 1L, so this is one long. Okay. Then this question mark is replaced by 1L. Okay. And this is all handled on runtime. So you don't have to bother. Okay. You have to just make sure that you have a field company ID in this particular entity. Okay. And since we are mentioning the many to one relationship here, we will have company ID when this is converted into the table format. Okay. So we have defined this, okay, and it's up to Spring Data GPA to give us the implementation on runtime. All right. So what we are doing now here, back to review service implementation class. So we are using this particular method, okay, and we are trying to get the list of all the reviews, okay. And what we are going to do is we are going to return all the reviews. So I'm going to say, I'm going to replace null with reviews, okay, and we are done. So we have written the method which enables us to get all the reviews by company ID, okay. Now we are going to use this particular method in the controller. So let us switch over to the controller. So here in the controller, okay, I am going to define a method, and let's say the method is public, and I'm going to say response entity, and I'm going to say list of reviews, okay, and I'll say get all reviews. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept the company ID as the path variable. So that is what we are getting as the path variable over here, okay. So I'm going to say @path variable and long, okay, let me scroll up. So I'll say long and I'll say ID. Now I'm going to say return, okay, response entity, and I'm going to say, okay, this will be new response entity, and I'll say this can be like review service dot get all reviews, and I'll pass in the ID and the HTTP status as okay, like so, okay. So we have this implementation defined now, okay, and I need to map this to a URL, okay. So I'm going to say get mapping here, okay, and this will be going to /reviews. So we are going to say /companies /company ID /reviews. So that is going to be the URL structure, and I'll hit save and let me run this code now, okay. Let us try testing this in our browser, okay. So if you head over, so we have not defined the endpoint for creation of review yet, but let us test this, okay. So I'll duplicate this jobs URL, okay, and here I'm going to say companies /1/reviews, and I'm going to paste it over here, and I'm going to send the request. Okay, so we got an internal server error, okay. So it said required URI template variable for method parameter long not present, okay. So where is this error coming in? So I understood what the error is. Here we are saying ID, but here we are accepting it as company ID. So I'll change this to ID over here, okay. Or let us keep us company ID because we have two IDs now, like the review ID and the company ID as well. So I'll take this as the company ID here. And here we are getting a warning, okay, because we have missed like these angular brackets, okay. So I'll rerun this code. Let us see what the output looks like now. And now if I do a send request, you will get an empty list of arrays which represents the reviews for a particular company. So right now we don't have any data, but once we have any data, we will see an output over here. So yeah, that's about how you can get all the reviews for a particular company using the review controller, service, and entity. Welcome back. So let us start working on the functionality that will help us add reviews to our application. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the review controller and we are going to talk about the endpoint. So the endpoint that we are going to have is companies /company ID, and I'm going to say /reviews. And in the request body, I'm going to have the review object. Okay. So let me add the post mapping over here. So I'll say post mapping. Okay. And we have the first part of the URL defined here. So it's companies/company ID. So this indicates like against which company we are adding the review. Okay. And then I'm going to say /reviews like so. And I'm going to say public, and I'll say void, and I'll say review, like add review, something like this. Okay. And we are going to have request body, which will be a review object. Okay. I'll say review. And also we have a path variable that we have added in the URL. So I'll say path variable, and it will be of long type, and it will be company ID like so. Okay. So this is what our method is going to be, and this won't be void. So we will add a response entity over here. Okay. So I'll say response entity like so. Okay. So this is what the endpoint is going to be. Now, here are two things we need to keep in mind. We are accepting the company ID, and we are accepting the entire review object. Now, why are we accepting the company ID? Because if you go to the review entity, to save a review, you need the company object. Okay. So using this ID, we are going to fetch the entire company object, and we are going to add it to the review. So this review that we are getting, we are going to add it over there. Okay. So I'll head over to my review service over here. Okay. And I'm going to define a method over here. So I'm going to say void add review, and I'll say long company ID. So this will have company ID, comma, review like so. Then I'll head over to the implementation class, and we'll get the methods implemented. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to define this particular method. So the step number 1 would be to get the company object. Okay. So we will say company, and I'll say company is equal to company service. So here is where the problem starts. Okay. So in order to fetch the company, we need company service, which does not exist in review service. Okay. So what we can do over here is I'll create an instance of company service. So private company service here, and I'll say company service, and I'll add that as a parameter over here. So I'll say company like so. Okay. And over here, I'm going to say this dot company service is equal to company service like so. Okay. So we have this defined. We are getting a small little warning here that this can be final. Okay. So we can take this suggestion and okay. So here it's saying it can be final. So I'll define this as final again like so. And it says is never accessed. Okay. So we will be accessing it shortly. So I'll say company service here dot get company by ID, and I'm going to pass the company ID over here. So we have the company object come up here. Now I can say if company is not equal to null, let's say. Okay. So we'll write the not null condition first. I'll say review dot set company, and I'll set the company object over here. Okay. And I'll say return review repository dot save, and I'll save the review here like so. Okay. Okay. So we should not return this. Okay. So I'll just add it over here, and I'll say I'll skip the return statement. So we don't need a return statement because the return type we have said anyways, it's void. Okay. So this is done. Okay. So the review object is saved over here. And now if you head over to controller, we need to make use of this review object. So I'm going to say review service dot add review, and I'm going to pass in the company ID, comma, review, like so. Okay. And I'm going to return, okay, so return new response entity, okay, review added successfully. Okay. And I'll have HTTP status dot okay, like so. Okay, now I'll run this code. Let us run this and let us see what it looks like. So the application has been started. Now we'll switch over to Postman and I will duplicate a post request here. So I'll just duplicate this company's post request. So we have companies /1/reviews. Okay. And I'll copy this endpoint and add it over here. Okay. And I'll also save this. Now here in the body, we need to add the data. So review has title. It has a description. So I'll say title is review 1. Description is description 1. Okay. And here the rating is 5.0, like so. Okay. So we have defined this, and what we can do is we can trigger this. So let us trigger. Okay. So it says review added successfully, but I believe there's a problem. So let us get the reviews endpoint. So here, if I try fetching the review, it's not added. And the reason for this is the company with ID 1 does not exist. Okay. So we need to handle this scenario wherein how a review is managed if the company does not exist. Okay. So to handle this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make add review return Boolean here. Okay. And I'll head over to the implementation class. Okay. So here review service implementation. This will also return Boolean then. Okay. And if the company is not equal to null, we will return true. Okay. Otherwise, I'll say we return false. So what is happening is if the company object is found, we add the review, we save the review and return true. Else we return false. So false means company object does not exist. Okay. So I'll head over to the controller now. So I'll switch over to the review controller here. And now here we have this returning Boolean. So I can say Boolean is review saved, like so. And here I'll add an if condition. I'll say if is review saved, then you need to return this response entity. Okay. And here I'll say else. And if this is false, then we will say review not saved, like so. So you can add any message that you want. Okay. So I'll say review not saved and I'll say over here not found. Okay. Let us rerun this and let us test the changes. So the application is deployed now. Now let us try adding the review. Okay, so we are doing a GET request. Let us head over to the post request here. Okay, and let us try adding the review. So you will get this 404 not found, which says review not saved. And that is because company 1 does not exist. How do you fix this? You create the company first. So I'll create this company here. Okay, company added. Now, if you get the list of all the companies, okay, so if I get the list of all the companies, you have one company, okay, but it does not have any reviews, like you can see. Okay, so what I will do is I will do a post request here and I'll add a review against the company. So the review is added successfully. Okay, Now, if you try to get all the companies, you'll see you have a review being come up with the company. Okay. And if you try to get all the reviews as well, so if I go over here, okay, and if I try to get the review against a particular company using a GET request, I get the review as well. Okay, so this is working perfectly fine, and the scenario that we faced is very well handled. All right, so that's about how you can add a review against a company. Also, one thing I wanted to mention here, we are using the company service. So here, if you go to the implementation class, we are using the company service in the review service over here. And this is common if you have all the services for different entities in a single project. Okay, so you will use these services across the project. So if you have a large project, there is a possibility that you would add a dependency on a company service in your review service implementation class and use that to get the company data. All right. So this is about how you can add reviews to the company. So let us start building the functionality to get the review, like a specific review for a specific company. So what we are going to need is, we are already getting the company ID here in the parent URL of this controller, and then we are going to even get the review ID from the user. Okay, so what our URL is going to look like is, it will be a get mapping. Okay, and I'm going to say over here /reviews/ I'll say review ID. Okay, like so. And I'm going to select all of this and put this in round inverted commas. Okay, so here I'll say public and I'll say review, and this review needs to be wrapped in the response entity class. So I'll say response entity, and we'll have review, and we'll say get review here. Now we are accepting a path variable which is long ID, and this ID is company ID. So I'll just be specific here. Okay, and then we are accepting another path variable which is long, and it is review ID, like so. Now here we are going to make use of a service class. Okay, and we are going to get the specified review. So let us head over to the service class and let us define the implementation for the same. Okay, so I'll close all of this, and I have review service implementation open here. Okay, so I'll go down, or before going to the implementation, we need to also define the method over here. So I'm going to say review, and I'll say get review, and I'll say long company ID, or I can simply copy. The parameters will be same over here. Okay, so it will be this, and then long review ID, like so. Okay, then let's head over to the implementation class, and we will get the methods implemented. Now here we are going to make use of the get all reviews method. Okay, we'll be calling this method internally. So we'll get all the reviews that exist in the table, and then we will filter it with company ID. Okay, so we can say review repository dot find. Okay, or you can find by company ID as well directly. Okay, so I'll say find by company ID, and I'll pass the company ID over here. Okay, so what are you going to get as the response? So you're getting the list of reviews over here. Okay, which is fine. So you can either use this method over here. You can call get all reviews. Okay, and you can pass in the company ID. Okay, or you can directly use this method, which internally anyways this method is using it. Okay, so we straight away use this method, and I'll say list, and I'll say review here, and I'll say reviews, like so. Okay, now what I will do is I need to filter these reviews and get the review with this review ID. Okay, So I can say return, and here I'll say reviews dot. So I'll make use of streams, which is a Java concept. So I'll convert this list of review into stream for filtering purpose. Okay. Now I'll say dot filter, and I'll say review. Okay. So I get an auto suggest here, and I'll say review dot get ID dot equals review ID, like so. Okay. And then I'll say dot find first. Okay. So it will give us the first result from the filtered result set. Okay. And then I'll say or else null. So if nothing is found, we return null. So what we are doing is we are converting this list for filtering purpose into a stream. And then we are applying the filter on the stream, wherein we are specifying the condition as review.getID equals to review ID. Okay. And we are getting the first one from this filtered. And then if there is no object found or nothing found, we return null. So that is how we are working with this. Okay. And with this one line of code, it's all done. Okay. So this service is defined. Now what we need to do is we need to go to the controller. Okay. So I'll go over here, and here in the controller, I'll say return, and I'll say review service dot get review, and I'll pass in the company ID comma review ID, like so. Okay. And we will wrap this into the response entity. Okay. So let me add a response entity class over here. Okay. And I'll say like so. Okay. And I'll say new over here. So we need to create the object as well. Okay. And we need to add the status code. So I'll say http status dot okay. Okay. I messed up with the brackets, so I need to close the bracket here. So this looks perfectly fine. Okay. So what we are doing is we are returning the response entity object where we are getting the review by calling this method, and then we are returning the HTTP status. Okay. So I'll run this and let us test this in our browser. Okay. Or not in the browser, we'll use Postman. So you can test it in the browser as well. It's a get mapping, but we'll make use of Postman. Okay. So the endpoint is a get endpoint. So I'll just duplicate this one. Okay. And I'll say companies /1/reviews/ so let me run this. So you don't have any reviews, so you can pass the review ID, and I'll paste that over here. Okay. And I'll hit save. So we need to create the reviews first. Okay. So I'll close all of these tabs. Okay. So I'll say close all the tabs, and I'll get the changes saved. So we have this one tab open. Okay. Now I'll create a review. So I'll first create a company, and then I'll create a review. Okay. And then I'll go over here, and I'll try to get a particular review. So you can see we are able to get one review, and this is not being returned as an array. It is being returned in the JSON format. So if you try to get all the reviews, you'll get in the form of arrays over here, as you can see. But since we are getting a specific review, we are getting it in the form of just the normal JSON, which is not an array. Okay. So this is how you can work with or build the functionality to get a specific review against a particular company. Let us start writing some code to enable users to update a particular review. So what are we going to need from the user? So we are going to need the company ID, the review ID, and the review itself. So if you head over to controller, so we are already in the controller. So we are going to need the company ID. Okay. And then I'm going to define a put mapping here. So since it's an update request, it will be a put request. Okay. And I'm going to say slash, and this will be reviews slash review ID. I'll select this entire thing and I'll put this as a string over here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method. I'm going to say public void, or I should say response entity string, and I'll say update review. Okay. And here I'll be accepting a path variable, of course, which is company ID. Okay. So I'll just copy this. We'll need both these parameters. Okay. So I'll paste that over here. Okay. And we will need one more parameter, which is review itself, and that will come as a request body. Okay. So I'll say review and review. Okay. So this is what our method is going to look like. Okay. And of course we are going to return saying new response entity. I'll say review updated successfully, and then we can have HTTP status dot OK. Okay, so this is done. Now there is a reason why we are accepting the company ID, review ID and review. So review ID tells us which review is supposed to be updated. The review object tells us this is the new updated review. Okay, so we are getting new updated review from this. This tells us which review is to be updated, and company ID enables us to fetch the company against which we are updating the review. So if you remember, in review.java or the review entity, we have the company object. So we need to fetch the entire object based on the ID that we get from the user. So I'm going to head over to the review service implementation here. Or before going over here, I need to also define a method over here. So I'll say void, I'll say save review, or update review would be a better name. So I'll say update review. Okay. Now here I'm going to accept company ID, review ID, as well as the review itself. Okay. And I'll end this with a semicolon, and I'll head over to the implementation class and I will implement the methods here. Okay. So this is done. Now let us start defining the logic over here. So what we are going to do is we are going to say if, I'll say company service. So first we will check if this particular company exists or not. Okay. So I'll say if company service dot get company. So when I say get company, I have this method get company by ID, to which I'll pass company ID over here. I pass in the company ID, I get the response. Now we need to validate this in the if statement. So I'll say not equal to null. So this method is executed, sorry, not this method, but this statement is executed only if company ID is not equal to null. Okay. And I can say over here, so this is the updated review, right? So I'll say updated review here. Okay. So what I will do is I'll say updated review dot set company, and I'll say company service dot get company by ID, and I'll pass in the company ID here. Okay. And I'm going to say updated review dot set ID. So I'll set the review ID as well, and the review ID is the review ID itself. And then I'm going to say review repository dot save. Okay. And we save the updated review. Okay. Now the thing is, we can even give some feedback mechanism over here. So if this is done, then we can say return, and I'll say true over here. Okay. We can return Boolean. So that's the feedback that we are giving to the controller, or else I'll say return false. Okay. And I can return a Boolean value, and I can convert this to Boolean here. Okay. And this we are doing so that we can also show 404 if we get the false as the result. Okay. So here in the service, I need to update this here. Okay. So once I update, the error goes away. Okay, now since we are getting the Boolean result from the service, okay, what we are going to do is in controller, I'm going to say Boolean is review updated, like so, and I'm going to say review service dot update review, and I'll pass company ID, comma, review ID, comma, updated, or review. I'll just mention review here, and I'll just align this a bit. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if is review updated. Okay, so if review is updated, or I don't need braces over here, so I'll just cut this and I'll paste it over here. Okay, so review has been updated, else I'll again paste the same thing, and instead of okay, I'll say not found and review not updated. Okay, and I'll remove successfully over here. Okay, so this is a code that enables us to update the review against any company. So I'll rerun this. Okay, let us see the output. So we have the application running. Now what I'm going to do is I'm first going to create a company. Okay, so company created, and I will add a review as well against the company. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this request, and I'm going to convert this into a put request, like so. And I'm going to say, so here the URL will be companies/company ID reviews/review ID. So I'll say 1 over here. Okay, and I'll update the name of this request. Okay, now here we'll pass the updated review. So this is the updated review that we are sending in the body. So take a look at the put request. We have put, then review, and then we have the JSON body. So this JSON body signifies the fields that we need for review. Okay, and here we have, this is company ID and this is the review ID. Okay, so what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to add the updated string over here, updated, so that we know like the review has been updated. If we keep the update and the old one same, you won't know. So I'm going to send this, you get 200 okay. And if we say, let's say, if we say 2 over here, okay, then you get 404, like review is not updated. Okay, so this is working fine. Okay, I'll just press Ctrl C and I'll hit save. Now let us try getting the reviews. Okay, so if you get this review here, you'll see that it is being updated. Okay, so this update functionality is working well. Okay, and we are able to update the review right from Postman with the help of post request, and that too against a particular company. So this is about the update review functionality. So let's start writing some code to build the delete functionality for the reviews. So what are we going to do is we are going to enable the functionality which will help us delete the review against a specific company. Okay, so we are going to accept, so we are going to go to review controller, and we will be accepting a couple of parameters from the user. So first parameter is the company ID, of course, which we are getting over here. Okay, and then we are even going to get the review ID. So I'm going to say delete mapping here, and I'm going to say /reviews/review ID. Okay, so this is a mapping that we are going to have, and I'm going to say public and response entity, and this will be Boolean. Okay, and let me add Boolean here, and here I'm going to say delete review, and so we don't need to return Boolean here, so I'll say string here. Okay, and here I'm going to accept 2 path variables. Okay, so I can copy it from here. All right, and I'll paste it over here like so. So this is going to be our function. Okay, and on successful deletion, we are going to return a new response entity object. Okay, so this is how it's going to be. So let me paste this over here. So is review deleted is going to be the variable, and I can create a local variable is review deleted. Okay, and here I'll say review deleted successfully, or I can say review not deleted. Okay, so this is going to be the controller, and here now I'm going to assign this boolean variable a value which will come in from the review service dot delete review. So this method does not exist as of now, so we need to create this method. So to create the method, I'll hover on this and it will say create a method delete review in review service. Okay, so we define this over here. Okay, and then if we go to review service implementation, you can get it implemented here. So now what I'm going to do is we have company ID and we have the review ID as well. So first I'm going to validate this company ID and review ID. So I'm going to say if, okay. So I'm going to say company service dot get company by ID, and I'm going to pass in the company ID here. Okay. Now I'm going to add a condition here if it's not equal to null. So if this is not equal to null, okay, and review repository. So let me move this to the next line, and review repository dot exists by ID, and I'm going to check for review ID. Okay, so if these both conditions are true, only then I'll start entering this if statement. Okay, and within this if statement, I'm going to start writing the code that will enable me to delete this particular review. So now deletion will have some steps. So first we will have to retrieve the review object. Okay, so I'm going to say review is equal to review repository dot get review, or I'm going to say find by ID. Okay, so this is going to be find by ID, and I'm going to pass in the review ID here. Okay, so we are going to get the review first. Okay, so this is optional. So I'm going to say dot or else null. So null won't be, so we won't get null over here because we are already checking if this review exists or not. So it definitely exists, and we are going to get an object over here. Okay, but we will say company over here. So here we'll have to get the company object. So I'll say review dot get company. And the reason we are getting the associated company is because we want to remove the review from the company as well. Okay, so if you notice over here in the company object, so let me head over to the company object. We have the list of reviews, and in the review we also have a company. So it's a bi-directional mapping. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get the company for us, and I'm going to say company dot get reviews dot remove, and I'm going to say review like so. Okay, and then I'm going to say company service dot update company, and here I'm going to pass in the updated version of company over here. Okay, so this requires more parameters, I believe. Update company, so it says company and then, so company and the ID it has. So I'll say company, comma, the company ID, like so. Okay, so this is done. And then we need to make use of review repository dot delete by ID, and I'm going to pass in the review ID over here. Okay, and with all of this, I'm going to return true, like so. Okay, and else if this is not a match, then we return false over here. Okay, so what we are doing is we are first retrieving the review, then retrieving the company as well. Okay, and then we are removing the review from the company reference. okay, because it's a bidirectional mapping. And then we are updating the company and then finally deleting the review. Okay, so this is done. Now let us switch over to the review controller. So review controller is all set. Okay, no changes needed over here. Let us run this and let us test how this goes. So the application is deployed. Now here I'll duplicate a request. Okay, so what we need to do is we need company ID and the review ID. So this request I'll just duplicate, okay, because it's a similar request, and I'll change this to delete and I'll give this name here. Okay, so we have this delete request. Now if I hit send, you'll get 404 not found because there are no companies and no reviews as well. Okay, so first thing first, I'll start creating a company. So I'll create this company and then another company. So there are two companies now. Now if you try to get the list of companies, okay, you will get two companies for now. They don't have any reviews yet. So I'll start posting reviews. So against company 1, I'll add review 1. Then against company 2, I'll add a review again. Then against company 2, I'll add a review with an updated JSON over here. Okay, so this is a JSON. Okay, now if you get the list of companies, you will have a couple of reviews. Okay, so the company 2 has 2 reviews and the company 1 has 1 review. Now let us try deleting. So here, so this is where is the delete request? So this is a delete request that we created. We need to hit save for it to appear here. Okay, so we are saying delete the review against company 2 and delete the one with review ID 1. Okay, so I'll send this and we get an internal server error. So let us check what the error is. So we got the error, and the error was essentially because we were not removing the references to a review completely. So how do we fix the issue? So what I did is I added review.setCompany as null. Okay, so this removed all the references in both the ways, like from the company side as well and from the review side as well. So to reiterate, we are getting the company, then we are removing the reviews from using this particular method, and I'm also explicitly setting the company as null over here using this method, and then we are updating the company and finally deleting the review from the database. Okay, so with this I'll rerun the changes, okay, and we'll test these changes in Postman. So in Postman, I'll first create a company. So this is company 1, and then again I'll create a company 2. So 2 companies have been created. Now I'll add a few reviews. So I'll add review 1 over here, like so, and then I'll add review 2, like so. And now we'll try to get all the companies. So I'll get all the companies, and you will see that we have 2 companies, but first company has 2 reviews. Now let us delete the review 1 from company 1. So I'll go over here and I'll say delete review 1 from company 1. So I'll send this, and the review has been deleted successfully. If I put any incorrect number, like if I say 5, which does not exist, you will get an error that it's not deleted. Okay, so this is done. Now if you try to get the companies, you'll find 1 review missing. And if you even run a separate get query, so if I expand this a bit, if you run a get query to get a particular review, so let me get a review. So review 2 exists, but we deleted 1 for 1 company, so that won't give any output. Okay, so this is how you can work on the delete functionality. All right, so that's about this class, and I shall see you all soon. Thank you.